God glorious day, my beloveds. It's wonderful to be here with you in this February month of love. And divine love expresses itself as agape love, infinite love. It expresses itself as philia love, love for humanity, our brothers and sisters, and erotic love or erotica love, romantic love. That's the Roman word for it, but it's all infinite love. So, right now, we are going to tune into that infinite love that we already embody. It's within every atom and cell of our very being. And for this, we are grateful to remember whose we are and who we are. So, I will begin with a verse of scripture that has been inspiring me right now at this time on the planet. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. That means trust in the divine presence that is in every cell and atom of your being. It is your very consciousness. And we lean not on our egoic understanding of life, but on the divine understanding of life. So, coming into this time and place, let's close our eyes and we are going to affirm the truths that are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So, placing our hands on our hearts or centering our consciousness in our heart. Let's know this together, my beloveds. My heart is filled with the love of God. Let's know this together. My heart is filled with the love of God. Let's know this again. My heart is filled with the love of God. Because our hearts are full with the overflowing love of the divine intelligence of the universe, called God, Source, Quantum Field. When the heart is full with the love of the divine, everything works in our lives. There is no worry or fear. There is no doubt. There is serenity. Let's know this together. My heart is filled with the love of God. Breathing in and out, knowing and grounding in the spiritual truth principle. Ah, let's know together. I am full of serenity. Serenity is my way of life. Let's know this together. Serenity is my way of life. Serenity is my way of life. As we embody serenity, we trust. Serenity is knowing what we cannot change and accepting what we can change. Accepting what we cannot change and knowing what we can change. We are serene, serene, filled with serenity. My life is filled with serenity and all is well. Let's know this together. My life is filled with serenity and all is well. Serenity is a byproduct of trust. When we trust in the Lord, the law, the presence of God in our life, when we trust and know that we are co creators, no matter what is happening on the screen of our life, we can choose to trust and change. Let's know this together. I choose to trust and change for the better. Let's know it again. I choose to trust and change for the better. Let's know it a third time. I choose to trust and change for the better. As we lean not on our own understanding, but we lean on the Spirit of God, the Infinite One Almighty, the same yesterday and today. We know that our health that God is in control of our health. We know that God is in control of our wealth. We know that God is in control of our peace. We know that one with God is a majority, that we are on the best team in the universe. We are one with our God presence. Let's know this together. I am one with the God presence within me. Let's know this again. I am one with the God presence within me. Let's know it again. I am one with the God presence within me. My beloveds, since we are one with this God presence within us, right here and right now, we are expressing divine perfect health. This is the truth, no matter what is appearing on the screen of our life. I am expressing divine radiant health. Let's know this together. I am expressing divine radiant health. Let's know it again. I am expressing divine radiant health. Ah, this power and presence that is never an absence is in charge of every atom and cell of our being, of our body temple. We do not beat our own hearts. We do not expel the breath from our lungs. There is a source that is sustaining us at every moment, and for this we are grateful. Ah, let's know together. Abundant wealth is circulating in my life. Let's know this together. Abundant wealth is circulating in my life. Let's know it again. Abundant wealth is circulating in my life. This presence that is beating our heart is spinning this planet on its axis, has created every grain of sand on the planet, has placed the stars in the sky, beats over 80 billion hearts, and is the very life of all living beings. If this isn't abundance, what is? So we know that we are one with this source, and that good is ever available to us at every moment. My good is unlimited. Let's know this together. My good is unlimited. Let's know it again. My good is unlimited. Oh, this infinite source is unlimited, and we are one with it, co-creators with this presence. So our good is unlimited. Ah, and let's know. I am expressing the peace that passes all understanding. Let's know this together. I am expressing the peace that passes all understanding. Let's know it again. I am expressing the peace that passes all understanding. My beloveds, we are anchored in God's peace. We are trusting in this presence that is never an absence. We know that we are one with this presence, and we know that all is well. And let's know this as a final thought of affirmation. All is well in my world. Let's know it again. All is well in my world. Let's know it one more time. All is well in my world, and I am safe. We are safe, and all is well in our world. Thank you, everyone, for this moment of meditative, affirmative prayer. And so it is. So this is the time where I give my message. And my beloveds, what times we're living in. We have now entered into 2021. We are in the second month of the year. The number 2, as you all know, I have a deep respect for numerology and Pythagoras, who was the greatest mathematician to have lived. He believed that numbers carried vibrations. And why wouldn't they? Because they are all part of God. We are all part of God. And everything is a part of God. And we can look to signs and symbols for guidance. They never replace the inner awareness of God within. Greater is He within, greater is it within, greater is she within. However, they are tools for us. So we are in the second, as we embark upon the second month of this year. 2 represents intuitive knowing. The 2 is extremely sensitive. So you may find yourself in this month being extremely sensitive to what is happening within your inner world and in the outer world. And it's also a wonderful time to revamp, recommit to your spiritual practices of meditation and affirmative prayer, and to tune out what the world is saying, tuning in to the eternal presence of God, of the all, of the thing itself on a daily basis. Because we are in a universal year number of 5. Last year was a numerological year number 4. Foundations were wrought, and we were challenged as truth students and as members of the human family to rebuild our foundations on God, on faith or fear. And the choice was truly ours. And in 2021, 20 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1 adds up to 5. And the 0 in the 2021 is a symbol for the infinite presence of God. So in this universal year number 5, we are called to practice trusting in God. Because as a shadow effect from last year, we've come into the year 2021 with a turbulent energy surrounding the events on the planet. 6 days into the new year, there was the storming of the Capitol. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And yes, we can have various opinions about what happened, but that turbulence, the so-called insurrection, is also something that occurs in our consciousness through fear, doubt, and worry. We can overcome and we can storm the Capitol of our inner well-being, of our inner God light, which is going to rule, faith or fear. So whatever is happening in the outer world is also happening in consciousness, collectively, whether we are expressing this turbulence or not, because we are all being called to trust in God during a global season of change. Fear or faith, my beloveds. So the number 5, the universal number for this year is 5. And if you would like to know what your personal year is, you add your month and your day to 2021. This is something you can all do after we're done here. But you would your month, your day, and 2021 reduced to a single digit. And this will give you your personal year number. So you can see how the global universal year is going to affect your own personal year, because we have the things that our soul is growing through and the things that the collective is growing through, and they influence each other. So a 5 year is a year of turbulent change. Number 5 is the number of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's fun, but it can be frivolous and it can also be about addiction. It is a year where one must find balance in change. And we know this personally as individuals. Sometimes change can push us off of our balance and our center, and we fall into addictions or bad habits. We self-medicate with food and drink and watching TV and staying up late, or we can self-medicate and vaccinate ourselves with the presence of God. The choice is ours. So when we are experiencing turbulent change, and this is what is in the vibration of the planet right now, how are we going to anchor ourselves? How are we going to trust in God? And what are the tools or the examples that we can tune into to remind us to trust in the Most High that is within us and everywhere present? Everywhere present. So, my beloveds, you know, in the tradition of Reverend Ed, who was foundational to our spiritual community, I enjoy interpreting the Bible metaphysically. And so my teaching today, my message today will be anchored in that, in the sheroes and heroes of the Bible who have trusted in God when there was disappointment and turbulent change in their lives. So how do we trust in God? How to trust in God is a question that many truth students, believers, and spiritual people have asked themselves. Maybe you are asking yourself how to trust in God during a difficult time. You might have just gone through a terrible divorce or an illness or financial instability or job loss or just fear, doubt, and worry. We are all seeking answers. Or maybe you've just lost someone. I know many of us are losing people through COVID, and just many are making their transitions. So, how do we trust? We must remember that God promises that everything, that God does not promise that everything will be easy, that this school, this earth plane is a school. We are here to learn lessons. We are here to grow spiritually. But he does promise to never leave or forsake us. That presence is never an absence. It is within us, but we must choose to commune with this presence. Jesus, one of the master teachers, tells us to pray without ceasing, to turn to God in help. And God will help us with every need. With God's help, you can and will experience the peace and the joy that comes from being in relationship with his presence, with this presence. It's only through connecting with God that your soul can find satisfying joy. It is only when we connect on a daily basis through affirmative prayer and meditation, contemplation, and study do we find satisfying joy. So, one of the first steps, or the most important step in trusting in God, is trusting God with your mind. One of the greatest battles we face as New Thought truth students begins, and as human beings everywhere, begins and ends in the mind. It is here in which the war is won or lost before anything materializes in the physical world around us. So let's remember a beautiful passage from the scriptures that we interpret metaphysically as truth students. And it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. We know as truth students that God's will for us is the highest good, and that highest good is prosperity, health, wholeness, peace, fulfillment, creativity, love, rejoicing, happiness, all of our heart's desires, because we are co-creators with this presence, but we cannot be conformed to the pattern of this world. We must be transformed by the renewing of our minds. This is how we cultivate trust. This is how we cultivate peace. This is how we cultivate faith, through the renewing of our minds. And we do this through meditation, prayer, and contemplation. I know I reiterate this constantly every time I'm blessed to speak to you, my brothers and sisters, but it's because I was someone that lived in tremendous amounts of fear, doubt, and worry. I suffered from depression in my 20s. I sabotaged myself constantly. But when I began to practice meditation, contemplation, and affirmative prayer and the use of affirmations, 5 minute increments in my life began to change from the inside out. That is why I will continue with resounding joy to reinforce meditation as a medicinal, spiritual, powerful powerhouse of a tool to change our thinking and to renew our minds. When we consciously connect with the mind of God, one with the mind of God, we tune into a power that is greater than anything on this planet, and we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. A conformed life is not God's desire. What's a conformed life and what does it look like? How do we conform to the world around us? A person who is conforming to the world around them will look like the world. Vibrationally, they will look like the world. They will speak like the world. They will live like the world. They will think like the world. It behooves us, each and every one of us, to take inventory of our lives right now to see where we line up. These are some questions to ponder. Do you watch what the world watches? Watching television, watching the news, watching movies, watching sports, watching and tuning into the opinions of humanity? Do you speak what the world speaks? Doubt, fear, worry, cursing, selfishness, ego, centrism? What about the thoughts you're having? Are you imagining things going wrong? Are you thinking more of yourself than others? Are you thinking that solutions and the answers to your life are up to you? Or are you choosing to connect with the one power and the one presence on a daily basis, turning away from the outer world and reflecting on the inner world and every good thing? Do you, so you want to think with your own mind. You want to compare and contrast. You want to reflect on your inner mind, on your inner life. Who is in charge of it? Is the world in charge of it, or are you in charge of it? Are you in charge of it? These things, my beloved, these principles, these practices, these disciplines will bring about trusting in God. Trust in God. And the scriptures, Solomon, who wrote the Proverbs, reminds us again, trust in the Lord with all your heart. That means trust in God with all of your consciousness, all of your mind, all of your feeling, all of your thinking. Your heart is your consciousness. It is your inner world. It is the secret place. What are you thinking in your secret place? Are you trusting in God, or are you trusting more in this world? It is wonderful that we have this vaccine. It is wonderful that we've had all of the medical superstars and geniuses create this vaccine for us. And yet many of us will be waiting a long time before we receive the vaccine. Is your faith in the vaccine, or is the faith for your health in God? Even as we await this vaccine, even if we take it, there will be other mutations of COVID-19. They're already beginning to tell us that. Are you living in fear, or are you trusting in God for your good? We are truth students, my beloveds, and the choice is ours. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Let's lean on the understanding that God has. And that understanding is unlimited. And that understanding is infinite. Infinite possibilities of good, infinite possibilities of solutions in God, not in our own understanding, not in the world's understanding, as brilliant as we may be. God, God. We lean on God's infinite understanding and on the infinite possibilities of the Most High. This will renew our strength. We will run and we shall not faint, trusting in God. And in all your ways submit to the one power and the one presence, and he will make your paths straight. And he will make your paths straight. So there are 7 examples of trusting God in difficult times that are here to inspire us, found in the Bible, that we interpret metaphysically, because we know that the Bible is the journey of the soul's awakening from Adam to the Christ consciousness and the I am presence. So here are examples of sheroes and heroes in the Bible who have trusted in God for our good, for their good. Faith in God brings comfort and cheer, even in the midst of stress and crushing difficulties. Faith is what helps us to trust God in difficult times. To see difficulty the way God does, sometimes we can use the Bible and its teachings to help us. Here are 7 examples of the Bible, heroes and sheroes that will inspire us. Number 1, Deborah, trusting God through the demands of life. Difficulty comes in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes difficulty isn't a drastic tragedy, but the busy chaos of managing life. With all we want to accomplish on a weekly and daily basis, we can end up worn out, I know I do, disappointed, and never feeling like we've finished anything. My to-do list seems to go on forever, even in this pandemic. Deborah was one of those amazingly talented people who seemed to be able to do it all. She was a leader, a judge, a prophetess, a wife, and a mother. And along with that, she courageously led the Israelites into battle. Though she was inspirational, sometimes I feel like I can't relate to these mystical symbols of heroic beings in the Bible. How did she do it all? How did she do it all? With our demanding jobs, how can we help care for our families during COVID? Just as Deborah did. Deborah's family was the people of Israel, and it had its dysfunctions, like many of ours do. Hers was just bigger. I can't imagine being a mother to the people of Israel. Then Deborah said to Barak, because she led them in battle. So I was drawn to Deborah because it's rare to see a woman general uh, leading the Israelites army into battle. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went to Mount Tabor with 10,000 of his men following. Barak was her general. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all of his chariots and the army by the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Deborah believed and trusted God in a way that can be hard for us to do. God was real and present in her life, and she believed that victory was already hers through God. Deborah believed that God went before her. My beloved brothers and sisters, it is so important as we go through the season of COVID-19 and all of these incredible changes on the planet to know that God goes before us, to know that any weapon formed against us will not prosper, that we are shielded in the armor of God. All of these ancient terms basically mean that we carry the vibration and the energetic field of the Most High all around us. When we are tuned to this presence, nothing, no negativity will prosper because we will counteract it by trusting in God and holding the highest vision for our lives in our thoughts and in our feelings. The choice is ours. And Deborah was an example of knowing that God goes before her. So as we wait for our vaccine, as we wait for this time of the season of COVID to end, let's know that God goes before us, that we are surrounded in a force field of protection, as our prayer of protection reminds us. The second example is Zachariah and Elizabeth, trusting God when a longing is unfulfilled. And many of us have longings, desires for prosperity, desires for partnership, desires for radiant health expressing in our body temple that have not been fulfilled. And Zachariah and Elizabeth are an example for us. A longing unfulfilled can be disheartening. Imagine being married for maybe over 100 years, unable to have children, and living in a culture that measured God's love by the number of children you manifested. Children are manifestations in the Bible, metaphysically. This is the story of Zachariah and Elizabeth, a couple who were too old and very, very old and childless. They are an example of people who understood a longing unfulfilled, the heartache of being denied something that you've longed for and not knowing why. Have you been denied something that you've longed for a long time? Maybe there's a lingering health situation that won't go away. Maybe there's a child that rejects your influence. Maybe there's a character fault or an addiction or a fear or lack has manifested in your life. Well, Zachariah and Elizabeth understood this and they remained faithful while waiting on God. And it says, in the time of Herod, the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zachariah who belonged to the priestly family of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all of the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. They were childless because Elizabeth could not conceive, and yet they hoped and they trusted in God. Even when a longing goes unfulfilled, my beloveds, will we choose to trust in God? Let Elizabeth and Zachariah be your heroes and sheroes, trusting in God, practicing the presence, even when an answer is not showing up, practicing gratitude, even when an answer is not showing up. This is what we are called to do. Let's hold on to our faith no matter what. The next example is Isaiah, trusting in God in bad news. Isaiah was chosen by God to deliver an important message to the Israelites. God set up his people for an incredible future of redemption and hope. But before that could happen, God gave Isaiah an intense vision that overwhelmed him. This was crucial. This was a crucial moment for Isaiah to trust in God's plan and remain faithful. He said, "My stomach sinks, my gut churns with pain. I'm in labor like a woman in labor. I cannot bear the news. I am bent in agony. I am in a fog of depression." Isaiah knew what was going to happen with his people, and yet he had to stay strong and he had to lead. Even though he knew he had to lead, he was able to be honest with God about his doubts and his frustrations. Even though he believed that God would see him through and that God had chosen him to help others, he was still faced with challenges. Sometimes, my beloveds, we can't meditate. Sometimes we can't pray. Sometimes we can just cry or ask for help. There have been times in my life that my only prayer is help, help, help. And yet that saying, "God, please help me," is a prayer of faith, is a way that I am trusting God, even when I receive bad news about someone passing away from COVID or illness or accidents or a loss of a job. When I can only say, "Spirit, help me to get through that." That is an act of faith and it is an act of trust. And Isaiah exemplified this. Isaiah exemplified this. The woman that was healed by Jesus, trusting God, is taking risks despite the pain. In Mark 5, we find a scene that is one of the greatest healing miracles in the Bible. People from all over the region had rushed and gathered to see Jesus wherever he went. And on this particular day, in a crowd, there was a woman who had been suffering with chronic bleeding for 12 years. Blood is life force energy. Symbolically, metaphysically, this woman's life force energy had been pouring out of her. She could not attune with the presence of God. There was a leakage, maybe negative thinking, fear, dis-ease for 12 years. She had visited many doctors and had spent time and money on countless treatments. But instead of getting better, her condition worsened. Because of her illness, on top of it, she was rejected by society. She was considered unclean according to the biblical laws of the time. You can only imagine. And so when she heard that the master teacher, this miraculous healer, was in town, she knew that she had to go there. When she heard Jesus was coming, she knew she had to be there. She came up behind him in a crowd and touched his clothes. And because she thought, "If I can just touch his clothes, I will be healed," immediately her bleeding stopped. And she felt in her body that she had been freed from suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. And he turned around to the crowd and said, "Who has touched my clothing?" "You see, the people are crowding around him," his disciples answered. "And yet you asked, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see how it had been done. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Your faith and your trust in God has made you whole. So, my beloveds, this is the greatest miracle of the Bible, one of the greatest miracles. There are countless and endless examples of sheroes and heroes who have exemplified trusting in God. Know, my beloveds, at this time on the planet, that your faith, your trusting in God will make you whole, will restore you to health, will restore you to wholeness, will prosper you, will bring about the right relationships into your life. If you embody this faith and this trusting, faith without seeing, faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Trust and know that your faith will make you whole. Moses trusted in God when there was no way out, when he stood on that hill in front of the Red Sea, which was actually the Sea of Reeds. He took his staff, holding it over the Red Sea, and it parted. God showed up when there was no way out. Know that when you trust in God and there seems to be no way out, a way will be made for you. Trust in the God within you, my beloveds. David finally became king of the Israelites, and he was anointed king, and he had fought Goliath. And yet, after doing all of that, he was pursued for 12 years by King Saul, who was jealous of him and who did not want to let go of his aristocratic power. And yet, when life is not what you pictured it to be, David trusted in God. And so as he wandered throughout the land of the Israelites, being pursued by someone he thought had loved him, being pursued by someone who had betrayed him, he remained faithful and he trusted in God. He continued to trust in God when things did not turn out the way it seemed. And the three young Jewish men who were thrown into the fire by the power-hungry king trusted in God no matter the outcome. My beloveds, this is the call. This is the call. This is the test. These are the lessons. This is the time. Will you stand up and be counted? Will you know the truth, principles that we remember and reawaken to every Sunday? Will you mastermind with me and know where two or more are gathered, God is, and our trust is strengthened? This is what is possible for us as co-creators with the one presence and the one power. When we align our minds and our hearts with God, trusting in it, the thing itself, we can overcome all challenges. We can do it. We can do it. And so it is, my beloveds. And so it is. Amen.